Hey, Whit.
Trump has COVID. I mean, every week it's something else. It's almost like it can't get any more crazy and surreal. And the last week it was the Breonna indictments or non-indictments. The week before that it was something else. You can't even keep track. But here's what I do know. And by the way, I'm in black and white. Well, I'm white in black behind me, white lights. Not actually intentional, but so much division in this country, and there's been so much division around black and white, around race, and certainly around left and right, blue and red. So much division, so much conflict, and yet the common ground is where all the value, all the help comes for so many people who are in trouble right now, who need help. I'm Rob Nelson. It's Rob Nelson Live.
Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there.
My name's Rob Nelson. I used to have a talk show on Fox, a show on Fox News. But news in America is so produced. I don't care if you think it's left, right, center, fake.
You passed tougher legislation to deal with the paparazzi after what happened with you and your family.
I think it's very important that we focus on rebuilding.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. We got a great show tonight. You know how people say that? I've got a great show tonight. Every show's a great show, right? I have two fantastic guests. Everybody says that too. But I do. I really do. Whitney Lockheim from Open City Advocates, a really cool nonprofit in D.C., and Don Jackson out here in Jacksonville, Right Path Behavioral Help, a really cool mental health services company. I'm going to make this monologue short and sweet. And I'm going to start it with Trump, not just because it's the sort of elephant in the room, which it is, but Trump gets COVID. You kind of saw it coming. And the thing about it is, on the one hand, people are like, pray for the president. Other people are like, thank God he got it. I hope he dies. If it shows nothing else, it shows just how divided we are right now. Let's be honest. Trump's done no favors on that one. Probably the most divisive president we've ever had. I mean, if you ever had a non-unifying president, that would be Trump. But that aside, both sides are going to use this as a tool in their kit. And the reality is, and this is sort of the reality about Trump and COVID probably is, and I'm going to do a whole show about it at another time, is that Trump doesn't think COVID isn't a thing. Trump just thinks we got to go forward anyway. And he's such a stubborn, kind of blinded guy. He just digs in his heels and like, we're fine, we're fine. Let's face it, everything with Trump is fine. The whole world's fine with Trump. Everything's the best, the greatest. It's what egomaniacs do. But the reality is Trump knows it's a bad disease. And the reality is it is a bad disease and it's killed a lot of people. But the fact that he has it doesn't really change anything other than people will say, see, and hopefully won't become more afraid, because the reality is it's a terribly infectious disease that's out there. That's kills people. It typically kills the weakest, the most vulnerable, the elderly, people who are sick. But it's still a really highly infectious disease. And it's not a shocker. I wasn't shocked when people get, Trump got it. He's in the bubble. I mean, of course he got it. Everybody's going to, sooner or later, someone from everywhere will get it. Not most people, but it's just the reality. But the bigger point is how divided we are, even around something like that. And that division spreads because we've had months of protests. And, as you watch me and follow me, I was in those protests. I was there videoing. I was there talking to people. And we had the division between the cops and the protesters. And you have the division and the misunderstanding and the misinformation. Not misinformation like fake news. I mean misinformation in people's minds. There's just so little common ground. And yet common ground is where any kind of hope and healing comes from. All the protests for so long were focused on racial justice. And I like to joke, most of the people at the protests that I went to weren't the people who most needed it. People in the hood weren't at the protests. The people at the protests I saw were mostly white, a lot of black people, but not very many people from the communities most in trouble, most impoverished. And how do you help those people, the people in the most troubled communities? Because they need real help. They need infrastructure support. They need jobs. They need schools that work. They need hospitals that are funded. They need role models. They need to keep men out of prison. And people have to take accountability in those communities to make change. But we all are part of making that change, right? I mean, if you think you're not part of it, you're living in a fantasy land. You may have a big gate around your property. It only protects you for so long. And I'm not talking about whether someone's going to jump your fence and home invade you. Got a plane flying in. It's not the president. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about at the end of the day, if part of this, if a huge chunk of society is crumbling, we're all crumbling. We're all going down behind it. You can't hide behind your wall. You can't sit on your side of the Titanic and be okay. Oh, we're in the good seats. The whole boat's going to go down. You're going to sink. So we're all in it together. Quick story, and then I get to my guests. I've talked before about Norman. For those of you who follow the show, Norman was a kid I mentored years ago. And when I met him, Norman was a 15 going on 16 kid in a really, really bad part of DC. And Norman was that typical kid. He was like central casting for the kid who he was super dark skinned, super tall, really good looking, but fierce looking. He had these fierce eyes. And the first words out of Norman's mouth were, "I hate white people." He just glared at me. "I hate white people." It was at a mentoring tutoring program, and I was trying to work with him. And no one in the program wanted him in. They were kicking him out. I'm like, kick him out. He's the kid that most needs in. They're like, yeah, but he's too much work. I mean, he's the one that actually needs this. He's one of the best kids in. Like, how about him? Cut to Norman from your, I hate white people, to Norman taking me to school as a big brother and defending the fact to his friends that I could be his big brother even though I was white. It was a pretty special moment. To sitting in a funeral pew, the only white guy in a funeral service of about 250 people next to his mother after he died a really tragic, violent death. And two things I've not talked much about Norman that say it all to me were, one, how much I misunderstood Norman's world, even as I was in it on a daily basis, trying to be there for him. One was one day when I brought groceries over to his house. His mother had a small child, and his mother's daughter, who was 16, had a small child. There were a lot of kids in the house and no dad. And Norman had an older brother, and I dropped the groceries off, and it was, a lot of groceries, like a week's worth of groceries and baby formula and all this stuff. And a day and a half later, Norman calls me and says, "There's no more groceries." I'm like, "How could you have eaten all those groceries?" He's like, "It didn't. My big brother came home with his friends and they took the food." And I'm like, why would they take the food? It's like your little sister. Your little sister's baby. He's like, "Yeah, that's what they did." The second one was the day Norman came in my office with a gun and said, "I got this for protection." And I'm like, "Dude, give me your gun." He's like, "No, it's just for protection. I need a gun." I mean, you don't need a gun. You're 16 years old. You're not going to walk around with a gun. Give me your gun. Gave me his gun. A week later, he got stabbed in a subway stop in Northeast Washington, D.C. by two kids who jacked him for whatever money he had in his pocket, which was like $2. He ran a mile to a hospital with a punctured lung, went into emergency surgery and survived. The third was Norman's death, because Norman's mom asked me about a month before if I would adopt him. And I was like, "Are you crazy? You want me to adopt him? He doesn't adopt. I'm like, "He's your son." She was like, "Adopt him, get him out of here." I was like, no, that's not the answer. A month later, he was dead. And when I walked out of that funeral service, the pastor came up to me and said, "No offense intended, but you're the only white guy here." And that's great, but why? And you're sitting with his mother. And I was like, because I was part of Norman's life. And what shocked me was, why was I? Were we that divided? I'm the only white guy in his world? But that's what it was. I dedicated my book to Norman and my 2 other brothers because I've lost 3 brothers in my life. One when I was a kid, one 5 years ago who committed suicide, and Norman. So I have black brothers, white brothers, and a black brother. We can't survive on the racial divide. We've got to find a coming together, and we've got to be reaching out and helping one another. And those of us who can need to be providing mentorships and role models for those who need it. You can't look the other way, and you can't just expect people to figure it out on their own. Doesn't work that way. Everything is learned. I want to bring on my first 2 guests tonight, Whitney Lockheim and Don Jackson. Whitney runs a really cool nonprofit called Open City Advocates, and Don runs Right Path Behavioral Help. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Let me start. Let me start real quick. I want to get into a couple different things, but I want to dive right in, Whitney. I want for 1 second to Don, because Don, what I want people to know about you is that you were in a lot of ways that kid. I mean, I've heard your story. To me, as best I can tell, you were a little bit of Norman. As former officer, Relaford who mentored you, and you can talk about him, likes to say, you were 12 years old. You're really good looking, charming, charismatic. I've met you, but you ran the school. You were like the lord of the school. You're 12. You tell kids not to work. Nobody goes to work at school. The parents are like, the kids won't work. Don said, don't work. And you get your mom, the cops calling you, put them back to work, So you were like a leader, but you were going down the wrong path.
Yes, sir.
Talk about that.
Totally agree. Just growing up in urban areas, you can have 2 different types of role models, I'll say. You can have the good ones or you can have the bad ones. So at the age of 12, I kind of, chose to follow the bad ones. So my attitude was lead, and I didn't know how to lead right. So I led wrong. And it's, and then just going into school, it's kind of like, man, you got so much else going on home. Like, why do work today? Let's just rest. We didn't rest last night. Right. So, and then just being able to meet Relaford as I went along, which is my godfather. That was the day, and I told you this story last night. That was the day that he was taking me to jail, actually, for some sneakers being stolen that I knew about. I didn't still gonna say that, but he was taking me to jail, and my coach was telling him, like, listen, Don is a great kid. He's just been hanging with the wrong crowd. He's from this side of town. Give him a second chance, and I think things will be better. And so he took the handcuffs off, kept me in the back seat of the car for a while, which I hated. And he told me, he said, listen, I'm not going to take you to jail, but I want you to show up to my office every day. And I started to show up to his office every day, started to learn like different traits, different things for like mannerism. And instead of me going to class telling kids not to do work, eventually I start, sitting up front, listening, and the other kids followed. But that's kind of how like my path started. But as I went along, at 15, I had my first child. So I was a teen parent. And that process, having that role model really helped. Like you were saying about Norman, like it really helped because having Relaford there, he kind of walked me through the process of it, Again, like coming from a single parent family too, like I never had that male figure to really guide me right. So I had no clue about fatherhood.
I know, and you're 15 years old having a kid.
Right.
So let me pause you for a second. There's more of your story. Whitney, you obviously did not come from that same background. And again, we had a fun conversation about white privilege last night. I hate the word white privilege, but let's face it, we didn't grow up in a hood dealing with that kind of thing, and we had role models. What you've done and I want you to talk a little about it, because I heard Whitney's story on the phone, kind of going out of law school at American University and deciding she wanted to step into this space, and sort of it grew into this very cool nonprofit. I want you to talk a little about that and about what just happened, recently with the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. But take a second and just on what Don's saying, right? You were nodding your head when he was saying those things about his experience and about those role models. Obviously, you see and hear that all the time, right?
I see those leadership skills in my youth who I work with, because I work with teenagers who are in the justice system. And a lot of the kids I know are amazing leaders, and they're looking for the best way to use those leadership skills. And it just takes a little turn, and they can do amazing things, and they do things with those leadership skills. So that's what I'm nodding at, thinking of my own, I call them my kids, my clients, who have that kind of charisma and leadership that they show every day.
But it's great that you call them your kids, because in a way, right, you are a parental figure to them, I mean, you're an adult figure to them. I mean, what Don's saying, like, he didn't have that growing up in his life, and Don and Officer, Robert Relaford becomes that, at a certain point. And we've got a video I'm going to show you in a minute that involves Relaford talking with Don. But Whitney, the origins of your group was interesting. You got pretty into the legal system because you were a lawyer. And you tell us briefly about what happened with the Second Circuit. I can't say it. Second Circuit Court of Appeals. That's a big one, guys. It's just a federal court that makes big decisions. It oversees the lower courts.
I know it's confusing in DC. It's not the federal court. It's DC Court of Appeals.
Oh, sorry, the DC Court of Appeals. Right. My apologies. See, I got it wrong, and I went to law school, so forgive anybody who doesn't get it.
It's very confusing, especially in DC, where everything is kind of federal, kind of not. So in the DC Court of Appeals, we just won a case in February that establishes, or I should say recognizes, the right to counsel for youth once they've been sentenced in the juvenile system. So for kids in DC and around the country, it's pretty similar. Kids can be committed to a juvenile agency in the court, and that's their sentencing. And they can often be committed until age 21. And then that agency can decide whether to incarcerate them, supervise them at home, put them in a group home, send them to an out-of-state facility, all of the above, moving them back and forth. And that's all done previously without a lawyer. And there's a lot of rights at stake, a lot of processes. The agency can't just incarcerate anyone they want anytime. But without a lawyer there, the kid has alone, navigating this process alone for years and years. So we were very excited to win in February the case that says, no, kids do have a right to an attorney.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's great. And Don, you, and then, I'm going to start moving us faster along here, but I want everyone to know who you guys are. You eventually turned a huge corner and now have a successful company, for-profit company, that actually provides mental health services back into the communities you came from.
Yes, sir.
Or communities like the one you came from.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Great service. At Right Path, all our services is outpatient services. So we go to our clients' home, which we're very comfortable because I'm from that area. But I think in the minority areas, mental health is something that I always had that bad stigma. So one of my goals and still is vision is to change the stigma of mental health, because we all deal with it. Like nobody really want to talk about it. You say we all get angry, right? We all get sad. We all have issues. So when that's happening, most people in the minority area don't know how to cope with it. So all we're doing is going out, showing them, okay, when you're angry, these are tools, right? When you're sad, these are tools. When anxiety kick in, these are tools. So that's what mental health is. And that's what I love doing, because growing up, we don't have those resources and those tools. So I'm giving them those tools that they need to have.
Why is it? I mean, I think mental health is a stigma. It was for a long time for everybody. I mean, you can't get elected to office in the old days if you you had a mental breakdown. People would be like, oh, they'd use it against you. But it increasingly has always been a stigma for men, and even more so, right, for Black men and for Black communities, certainly lower class Black communities, lower income Black communities in general. Why is that? I mean, I know the answer for men, we're taught not to have emotion and da-da-da-da, but why is it so tough in more urban, inner city type, more underserved communities?
For one, we have to know that these services are actually there. So I do a lot of outreach. I go out and I let them know the right path is here. So that's the first thing why most men don't get services, because we don't really know about it. Secondly, it's a sense of being vulnerable. Like, you have to kind of let your guard down, your masculinity down, and say, look, I need help. I'm lost. And in that, it takes a lot of pride, you know. So most men, we don't do that. We hide our feelings, and then what happens, like, suicide rate is the highest amongst men between, I want to say, 45 to like 50 or something. Suicide rates is high because we hide all our things. So I think that's the biggest thing.
Whitney, what are we and you guys, by the way, feel free to dive in on top of me here. You know, I can talk for 4 hours by myself. I used to do a radio show. So don't feel like you got to wait for me to ask you a question if something pushes your button. But Whitney, you're watching, you know, you're white, and I'm guessing the majority of your clients are probably not white. Is that true?
100% are not white.
100%. And how do you experience that? And it's sort of curious, just on a personal level, like, do you walk around with a sense of white guilt, or like, obviously nobody could judge you and say you're not doing something, but sometimes we get stuck in this weird black-white divide. Not sometimes, we're in it.
I'm definitely very aware of it. I mean, I'm often in a room where I'm the only white person. I've been doing this work now for 17 years, so I'm pretty used to it. But mostly I'm aware of not knowing what you were talking about earlier, not knowing the experiences. I mean, I've been in my clients' homes, I've been in their communities for a long time, but they're still not where I grew up. They're not my communities where, you know, I'm not Black, and I never will be and never understand that. So most of what I'm thinking in my head is just an open-mindedness of being aware and ready to listen and knowing what I know and what I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And I think that really, you know, that thing I said about Norman with the gun really struck me, because anybody could have a big brother who comes, you know, you could live in a poor white community in the South and you could have a big brother who comes in and takes the food. I mean, if you ever watched the show Justified, all the white people were like horrible, like, you know, redneck white trash. But, you know, the gun thing shocked me, because he literally put that gun on the desk in front of me. And I was like, what are you doing? And he was dead serious. I need this for protection. And I was like, you're insane. A week later, I'm thinking, not that I wanted him to shoot somebody, but he wasn't making up. And he was a big guy. This is not a guy who got bullied. This was a guy who like bullied other people.
Yeah, my clients are in constant danger of that. And it's something that's just a world that I know only through them and through what they've told me and their experiences, which is very scary. Yeah, I don't have, my advice to them is, how do you protect yourself in that situation? You know, how can you keep yourself safe where you're not in danger? Because if you have a gun, then someone could think you're a threat, and that could come out. You could be used against you. You could get arrested. They could use your own gun. You know, it could escalate. So it's more
right.
about.
But how do you break that, Dom? Because at the same time, that makes sense. But at the same time, if you grow up, as you said, if you grow up in that community, you're like, well, listen, you know, you made that comment the other day, like you look around, like it's great to think you could be LeBron James, but the reality is the drug dealer down the street is doing really good. That's a good place to be.
Yeah. And then as far as the gun, our rule was growing up, and we probably still say this, is I'd rather be judged by 12 and carried by 6. That's just the motto of the neighborhood. So his thing is like, if I'm in these areas and everybody have a gun, I have to have a gun, right? So that's just fair. That's like going to a basketball court without a ball. You ain't gonna get much done. So that's how we feel. And most people say that's not norm, but when you're in a certain area, that's like the social norm. Like that's what happens.
And so how do we break that cycle? And would you guys both agree at some level that as much as the protests and all have created awareness, I like to call it that superficial awareness, and that a whole lot of people put something in their Instagram, they go to a protest, maybe a company even has a policy, they do a diversity training. And at the end of the day, most people go back to the world and their lives the way they are. the divide grows wider, and the people who most suffer from both excessive police forcing, whether it's racial or not, because inner city communities get policed hard, or from economic inequalities and injustices, tend to be not getting help at all right now. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
I would say fair.
I mean, because most people out there, middle class people, going, well, no, I'm all for Black Lives Matter, and I put the sign in my yard, and and I even this morning wrote on Facebook being sorry for my white privilege, and I'm thinking, who cares? Like, the person in that community is not getting any farther. You're not giving up your house to them. Like, you're not saying, come live in my neighborhood, have my house, I'll house swap with you.
Yeah, and I think what Whitney's doing is really great, because even though she don't understand what it is to be Black, she's getting an understanding. And I said that last night. I think what a lot of people do is they judge from the outside. Until you get clear understanding, and all get understanding, you have to get understanding. So yeah, I'm not Black or whatever, but I understand. Right. I've been there. I've sat in those houses. I drove down those streets. I've seen what it is, when kids don't have food. So I think a lot of people is kind of judging from the outside, like, well, it ain't that bad. And no, it's really bad. Like, you have to come in these inner cities and see what's going on. It's really bad. And I think, it's one thing to protest and march and people listen, but it's another thing to create change. So I think that's what has to happen.
And Don, you said something last night that I want you to share. You had an interesting perspective about the protests as you saw it for younger people. You thought a lot of younger people weren't really about the same long-term, waited out fight for long-term racial justice. It was more of like a payback kind of thing. Can you share that thought? Because that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think for the younger people, in any way, how they live now is microwave. We want something right now. So I think them going out is not about the long-term justice. It's about the police. Like, any young person now that's really watch TV and see what's going on, the issue that we feel at times is it's the police. So to go out there to be able to, you see the younger people jumping on the cars, burning up the police cars, like, that's instant gratification. I feel good that this person suffered for whatever I feel that they've done, right? And then you have the older people that's looking for long term.
And Whitney, when you're looking at your clients who are all obviously younger, what do you see when it comes to this more visceral kind of social cusp we're on? Like, are most of them really angry at the system, at white people or white privilege, or are more of them just angry at their situation and want out? Because we know Black on Black violence, there's a lot of crime in Black communities, and I've talked about it. I think we brought up last night, Don, that people, at the end of the day, one can't go without the other. There's police brutality like crazy, but there's a lot of problems within Black communities in the inner cities that need to be addressed because people are taking out their own.
When it comes to these issues right now, my clients are mostly focused on the police issues, which is part of what Don was talking about, is the police are watching them. They get followed. They get stopped 3 times a week for just being a Black man on the street and, looking like the suspect, but the suspect just is a Black male, so.
Well, let me stop you for that for a second. And by the way, Bruce, our producer, has a poll question. It fits perfect with this, which is, do people watching, we have a lot of watchers on Reddit. You guys, thanks for watching on Reddit and on YouTube and Facebook, thinking that, do they think that inner city communities are impoverished or underserved, whatever you want to call them, to mostly more Black and brown people in inner city communities are over policed by the police, are unfairly policed by the police? So back to your point, Whitney, to pick that up, it is true from your perspective, because a lot of white people fight that notion that Black people really do in these communities get stopped 3 times a week, literally for just looking like young Black suspect around 6 feet tall.
Yeah, and getting stopped isn't necessarily a friendly conversation. It's not, the experiences my clients have talked about is, at best, they're stopped and they have to stand there for half an hour while they get checked, and they're, and they have to do something in the car, and then they let them go. That's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, they get arrested because they said something or did something, or the police perceive something, or what, anything, or they happen to have something old on that they had that was coming up. Warrants sometimes don't go away when they're supposed to. So worst case scenario, they get arrested, or of course, worse, it's shot, as we see in some of these.
Right.
Cases. But they're scared, and it's a scary situation.
And Robert, you're scared. You're a big guy, and you're a successful guy, and you're articulate. You've had your run-ins with the law in your life, but you're also like now, you also mentored yourself under cops that just happened to sort of put their, arms around you as a kid. You're a little scared of cops still, right?
Definitely. And I shared that last night. I got stopped probably less than a month ago for speeding. And man, I told you when I handed my license, I was shaking like just passing that. And he was like, "What, you nervous?" I was like, "Man, I'm being stopped by the police." He was just like, "Be calm, show me your hands." I'm like, "All right." And really, it took a lot longer, because again, you got to get out the car. I'm like, to give him a speed. I was just speeding. Like I got a car to do it. And we on 95. So, but again, it's just uncomfortable. But again, I feel like if I was white, they would have probably gave me a warning, because he gave me a ticket. He would have gave me a warning. Your license is perfect. Leave. So, yeah.
And I guess to some extent that might be true, because more white people have that positive experience. I happen to be unique in that I have a lot of bad experiences running in with cops. But so I have a little black part of me there, but maybe it's because I hate authority, but maybe it's also because, and this is a thought I have, because a lot of black people understandably distrust the police and have had bad encounters and bad experiences, especially if you're like Whitney, your clients. And so you have an edge and an attitude when the cops show up. You're not, I think I shared a story. I got pulled over by a cop and I was nervous. I had done nothing wrong. I wasn't drinking, but my nervousness made him uncomfortable. And he started questioning me more and this and that. And I'm thinking, I'm going to get myself in trouble and I've done nothing wrong. And at one point he was like, "Have you had this happen to you a lot?" And I'm like, "No." I'm like, "Dude, no, I'm nervous." He's like, "Why are you nervous?" I'm thinking, because you're a cop and you pulled me over. Like, why wouldn't I be nervous? And I'm white. So I already know I'm not likely to end up getting shot. If nothing else, I might get detained. No one's going to be whipping out their gun and pulling the trigger the second they see me. Thoughts?
I think what Don said earlier about, this is taking it in a slightly different direction, but about people knowing what's out there, goes back to the thought of the gun too, as thinking about alternative paths and alternative ways to go. And this is another way of thinking about police too, is that if you see alternative interactions and alternative possibilities, then you're not going to think this is how this is going to go. And that goes for situations like with the gun or with mental health, is you see a way that's different from the way you've seen to be able to go. And I don't know, to me, it comes back to contact. If you've had all negative contact, say with cops or with white people or with black people, if you're white, then it's always going to be your preconception.
Mm-hmm.
The contact you have, the more you get to know people, if it's cops or white people,
Mm-hmm.
or people, you'll begin to see the families, the lives. And I think that ultimately what Don described too is he saw police in a different way because he had real contact, not superficial contact, but real contact.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Let's take 60 seconds and watch. Bruce, can we play this video? This is a video of former Officer Relaford sitting with Don and talking about mentoring.
And when you can have an example, to follow. And mentoring, it has to be consistent and committed. Like, I was committed to this young man, day in, day out.
The young man who looks like he's only 3 years younger than me, but whatever.
Yeah.
For the record, mentee, mentor. Somebody doesn't look their age. Just want to say.
But so what he had was the opportunity, as if I was his father, to watch me. So he watched me success. He watched me make mistakes. So he watched me enough so that then when he came along, he had something to go off of. You see, so you can have all the programming, but if you don't have that, like you said, that father in the home, you got to have that father replacement, which brings in a mentor. And I try to teach mentors, you got to be committed. It can't be just one day and I catch you again in 30 days. And no offense to any other mentor programs that's out there that asks you to spend one day a month or whatever. No offense to that. You need that too.
So you know, so Whitney, you're smiling because I'm guessing you agree. And for everybody watching, Don's smiling because literally Robert, they look like they're 2 years apart. And Robert found you when you're 12. So either he's eternally not aging, or you like aged like at triple speed. But go ahead.
I can explain that. See, relevant, and this is going to hit home. Remember, he told you he's from the country, and he was like, he grew up in the country. He never grew up in the city, in the hood. So it's less stress. Like when you grow up in the inner city, you age a lot faster. The pressure's there. And being a 15-year-old father, but you know, I still look good. I look better than him. Go ahead.
So Whitney, what does this role of mentoring play? Like, I mean, how fast, and both of you can jump in on this. It's a lot of work to mentor somebody. And at the end of the day, we need role models. So you can't possibly expand it big enough, right? I mean, can you get enough mentors in, or is it kind of like do the best you can? Or is there a way to kind of not McDonaldize it, but I mean, get enough out there that most people are getting the kind of support and help they need?
I mean, to us, it's a matter of working it into different aspects. So we work it into the way we are lawyers. So it's a way of being a lawyer. In addition to bringing in volunteer mentors, which we do, who are law students, it's also the way of being a lawyer. So our way of being a lawyer is being in constant contact, is also getting to know each other, going out for something fun or for dinner and doing different things, just having those conversations and that contact. But there's all different ways of doing it. I mean, in DC, we have a program called the Credible Messenger Initiative, which is bringing in people who have been through the system themselves, but are older now and stable, and they're becoming mentors. And that's a paid position that is doing a lot for kids in the juvenile system because they are calling them every day or every other day.
So here's my question for you, Whitney. Be totally honest. Do you go to bed at night ever and just kind of like, I don't know, you literally cry, but like feel just like you're doing great work. No one questions that. And every life you're changing is a life that's, you know, another Don that could make a difference in 6 other kids' lives. But do you ever just go to bed feeling like there's so many people that need help, and there's no way you can get enough people through your organization behind them so you can still feel good that you helped 20 people or 50 people or 100 people, but you're like, what about the 50,000 I couldn't reach?
Yeah. The hardest thing when we were first starting this program and going into the juvenile facility, we knew we could take 5 kids, and it's a facility of 60 kids. And the other kids are coming up. I want to be in your program. I want to be in your program. And we're full, you know, and we've taken all the kids we can because this is all the mentors we've got. That's awful. That's a horrible feeling to know that. What we do, the way we use that energy is to go and make changes. So this case that I was talking about earlier came out of that desire. Okay, how do we change this for all kids? And we can only work with, you know, maybe 5 at a time or 40 at a time. But how do we make this system wide and last a long time? And that's our way of doing it. So how do we change it here in DC? How do we change it in Florida or California? How do we go and really make it so that at least the gap that we saw with lawyers needing to be there, how do we fill that for everybody?
And Don, how do you look at it with mental health services? Obviously, you said the other day, most people won't even come. It has to be outpatient. They won't even go. The parents won't let, I mean, you literally have to go to their houses. So you can't send enough people to every young man's house to give them the mental health counseling that probably every single man in America needs.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think kind of like what Whitney said, you wish you could service everybody, and you have those nights and them scary calls that somebody called late about a kid and you're nervous if, you know, something's happened, you know, and you wish you can save everybody. So you have those restless nights where you see things happen and you wish like, hey, we can do more. But again, Right Path can only service so many people. There's only so many, you know, clients can be on a caseload, and but you just do the best you can.
Is this something we can, and by the way, Whitney, I'm guessing your client Tyrone, we had him for a second and we lost his feed, right?
Yeah, I haven't heard from him, so I think we've lost his.
Okay, we had one of Whitney's clients who was an interesting young man going to join us, but we couldn't get his feed to work. So we'll have him, we'll talk to him another time. And if you're out there listening to us, Tyrone, feel free to, off YouTube or whatever, just beam in your thoughts. We'll post them up on the screen. But how do we actually get like solutions that are, I'm going to keep saying, can we win this battle? Or is it a matter of saving a handful of people, and over 50 years or 100 years, you win the battle? You know, I mean, because there's systemic problems, and there are external systemic problems, and there's also internal systemic problems. The lack of enough decent role models in the house, you know, as Relaford was saying, you know, if there's not a dad in the house, you need to have a dad role model or a male role model, you know. And you said, Don, the other night, you said, you know, look, I get why young people look at again, I'm going to say it again, look at the drug dealer as a goal to aspire to, because you're going to have the money, you're going to have the resources, you're going to have a degree of power that you're not going to have otherwise. How do you shift that and break it in a real way?
What I do, man, and my thought of it, and that's a great question. Like, do you change it now? Is it like a 50-year? I think you get up every day and just give it everything. Try to reach as many kids as you can possibly reach, and you know, and just do everything, man. Do everything possible. Every resource I have, I extend it to everybody that I work with, and hopefully, as time go on, that change that you created now would keep going. You just paying it forward. So preferably, as time go on, you know, we get up every day with, and we do everything that we're supposed to do with each kid, each opportunity. I pray and I hope as time go on, everything gets better.
So it's almost like use a sports analogy. It's almost like you're a basketball team or football team, you know, and you're literally down so many points, and the good coaches are always like, don't figure out how we can score 49 points. Don't figure out how we can erase a 23-point deficit in an NBA game. One basket at a time. One first down at a time.
That's it.
Yeah. And, you know, we've got to do what we're best at. You know, I'm not good at everything. I'm good at one thing, really. And this is this model of legal representation. And that's what I'm going to create as a model and try to share and try to show other states they can do that. And at least I know that I'm doing the one thing I'm good at. And, you know, that's what we have to do. And if I thought about it as, can I fix poverty, or can I fix, you know, the neglect system, it would be overwhelming. I couldn't.
Whitney, do you have kids? You have kids, right?
I have an 8 and a 10-year-old, 2 boys.
So 2 quick questions on that. Do you ever, consider adopting kids, you know, young kids that are out there, like that situation that happened with me? I was shocked when his mom asked me to adopt him, and I realized in the end she did not want to have her son. She was scared she couldn't give him what he needed, and I could get him onto a different platform, because he died because he couldn't ultimately escape the cycle. And he wasn't even the one committing the crime. He was in a stolen car with another guy who was drunk when they crashed running, you know? And it was like, I mean, he was an accessory in a sense, but he hadn't actually even stolen the car. And it was like, so do you ever think about that? Or conversely, do you ever wonder about raising your kids? I don't want to sound like doom and gloom. There's a lot of optimism, but like what a world we're raising our children into is pretty divided. And Don, the same question to you, although you had a kid at 15, which is like, wow. So your child's basically a young adult. And I'm guessing you don't have any other little kids.
Yes, I have a son that's 11, and I have, yeah. So
okay. So same question to you. Do you know about the future for kids?
Well, there's 2 questions there. One is about, do I consider adoption? And then another about how I'm thinking about my own kids.
Very good lawyer. Look at you got. Let me separate these.
I have to separate them. Under the adoption, yes, I have thought about it, but my understanding of how adoption would work is I would have to spend a lot of time focusing on that, and I would want to spend a lot of time focusing on that and a lot of my emotion on that. And I only have so much emotion that I can spread around at time. And so ultimately I decided, no, my emotions and skills are best used in a wider range that's not necessarily 1 or 2 kids.
Right.
Because that's where I felt my skills and my need was, and I had recognized this niche. So that was a decision that I personally made, but anyone could go either way on that.
And by the way, that question wasn't asked with any judgment. I was just curious, because you do it, if there's ever a party that's like, you know what, I'm just going to extend the roof here a little far, like, you know, not you're clearly doing all day long.
I've wanted to, but ultimately it's not even solving it necessarily. You know, I mean, that maybe that's solving it in that moment, in that short term, but I really want a longer term fix for each client too. I want them that sense of self-determination, and not.
And what about the other question, you guys, raising kids in this world? And let me start with you, Don, because you're raising young do you have boy or girl? Do you say one of each?
Yeah, both.
So you're raising he's 11-year-old boy in again, it's a racially divisive world right now in America.
Definitely. And it's scary. So at probably 8, we had the first conversations about the police and things that's actually happening. And he's smart. So he's kind of wise enough to see and know like all cops are not bad. But he also knows that things can happen. So if you get stopped by an officer, or if you in school and this happens, so you have to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of let them know like things are different, because you are Black.
At 10, you're having these conversations with him.
Yeah, at 10, you have to have them.
And Whitney, not a conversation. Do you have a boy or a girl?
I have 2 boys.
Not a conversation you have with them when they're 10.
No, I've had other conversations though to understand what it is, what race is, and what it.
Yeah. But not to the same degree Don's talking about. You need to be aware that when those police officers stop you, boom, which again says a ton. Here's an idea I want to throw by you guys. And then we're nearing the end of the show. So, and I know Don, you have to be somewhere. So, would something like this is an idea where, I've been in Jacksonville. We're putting together this talk act now in Jacksonville, and it's basically a live stream forum where everybody comes together, and we get a community from all parts of it, from the church to the police to the sports, to the community activists, to people to come together, business people, to one, have a dialogue people aren't having, 2, to find actual concrete things that can happen at a community level initiative that could start making changes. And we're going to live stream it, but the whole point's before and after, to have that start creating a synergy and then happen in other cities. Here was an idea that some people have been tossing around. If you had a hotline, a number, hotline's sort of an old-fashioned word. If you had a number, and it's called Get Home Safe, that young people knew about, that was publicized in the schools, that like Jacksonville Jaguars and Jacksonville do a PSA on, that you put out through social media and influencers. And the point of that number is, if you get stopped by the cops, you speed dial it, and it goes right to a recording at a law firm that is capturing the audio. And that law firm's pro bonoing, agreeing to service those calls and connect you with a criminal defense lawyer. So the idea being, I've heard a lot of white people will say, well, if people just did what the cops said, they wouldn't get in trouble in the first place. And I'm like, yeah, but if that's easy for you to say, if you're that young black person in the community, or even an older black person, you're not sure doing what the cops say is going to end so well. Your instinct is to get away or run or resist more than I'll get a lawyer after the fact for being stopped too many times. If people had a resource like that, would it possibly work? As the idea being get home safe, and you will actually have a voice in that process that way, because you don't have to go home and figure it out. Like, someone's going to follow up and put it out there for you. Would that, and you'd obviously have to have the cooperation of a big law firm, like a personal injury firm, that would carry the calls, parcel them out to criminal defense lawyers. Would that make a difference in a small way?
I think you'd have to have the cooperation of the police too.
Yes. I didn't leave that out. No, the police are on board it too, and the police would know about it. No, I actually ran it by a head of a police union, and he, said that actually would be something we could support, because again, the cops would know about it. So the cops would know that that's out there.
That when the kids get stopped, they're going to start getting on their phone,
and it's just going to go right to a voice recording that's capturing anything that gets said. Don, are you looking skeptical, or are you like, maybe this could work?
I mean,
I know it's not solving all the problems, but would it make, even if one kid didn't get shot, the saving of just for that life, plus the ensuing, violence and chaos that happens.
I love resources, but definitely we gotta. It sounds great, but we got to look at all of the, all the little fine line things. Because the police come up, you're reaching for your cell phone because you're anxious, anxiety, and it falls on the floor, and you reaching, and I don't know how that would end.
That's exactly my thought. Is this seems like you're putting young people in a dangerous position to have to take an action in order to keep themselves safe. Where really,
the alternative is you've got to rely on the fact that black young black people don't have a recourse that white people have, which is the sort of the trust they know that the system can protect them if they're really getting screwed over.
Yeah, I mean, body cam footage is a good start in that and requiring that to be on. I know it's not always on, but it's a start, at least, in making the police accountable to making that available. I mean, I'm not saying no to it. I just am worried about asking, like Don said, about asking the kids to do something, or any adult, any person to do something in order to protect themselves against the police.
Well, somebody else could pull it out, I guess. I don't know. I'm going to put, Don, I'm going to get with you later, and I'm going to get you on board this idea, because I'm not stuck on it. It wasn't even my idea. I actually think if you had a campaign that enough people were like, the point of it is to get black people in inner city communities to feel like there is a way to get a legal representation behind you before you're shot, at which point, of course, some lawyer shows up to take your case.
Yeah, I'm again. We would have to role play it. We would have to.
All right, we're gonna role play it, Don. We're gonna role play it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'm all for it.
I'm trying to be creative and just look for, again, ways that you can get past one-on-one to get something that starts getting a buzz at a higher level. And if it's not that, you guys can help me come up with something.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, contact. I mean, there have been programs too where police and young people are getting to know each other better, and those seem to be working in both directions. You know, in police getting to know young people getting to know police. I mean, I know that's not the save all either, but I'm a big believer in human contact. And
so, what is that? Police officers need to start having barbecues in communities, or inviting kids to their house, you know, go to the bathhouse or whatever, but at a larger level, not just one-on-one, like we're going to invite 20 kids, you know?
Right. I mean, that's happening. I've heard about it happening, and I don't know, it sounds interesting. Don, what do you think?
I mean, I think and this is my thing that I really want to talk to somebody about.
Okay.
Guys, if you're hiring an officer to
lean in a little, it's hard to hear you. Lean into that mic.
How about now?
Yeah. Now it's good.
If you're hiring an officer to work in any neighborhood, he should have to train in that neighborhood first, not training as chasing bad guys. Mm-hmm. You need to get out your car, meet the old elderly people that's around there that knows everything. You need to meet the younger guys, the kids, get to know the whole culture of things that's actually going on. You can't just put somebody somewhere and they see something that looks strange, but it's normal there, and they like, oh, well, he's doing something wrong. Like, no, they was actually hugging and giving each other a nice high five or slap box and doing something that we do. So I think prior to bringing any officer to any community or neighborhood, they should have to train there with their badges and guns, learning that community and those kids, who's who and what's what.
That's great. So what I'm taking from both you, and then I want to thank you both for being on, is that it seems like a lot of the solutions maybe are actually simpler than we may think. Again, no one's going to solve the problem completely, but have to do with creating new ways for people to actually have real contact, real dialogue, real connection. And, you know, because that's where we'll change. You can pass a new rule for how police are supposed to, don't do this, do that, no chokeholds, no this. At the end of the day, if you don't have that connection or those relationships, it doesn't matter. The minute you're scared in a bad situation, you're stomping on the guy, right? So, I mean, you're both saying a different level of understanding, of integrating, connecting is what might start spreading that out, as well as getting more people invested in a hands-on way, like in the mentorship, hands-on kind of way. Is that fair?
And both. I mean, I'm all for rules that say no chokeholds. I think you could do both.
Oh, no. I am too. I'm just saying those rules clearly aren't enough is what I'm saying. Yeah. Like at the end of the day, if you have that attitude, it doesn't matter that there's the rule, because in the moment you break the rule. Right. Because you don't have you're afraid, you don't have the trust, you're angry, you're
right. And it's trust. That gut, that contact that Don's talking about changes your gut. It changes your instinct, because you develop new instincts and new understandings and a compassion, you know, all these things that you don't come with naturally to a foreign place, a community.
Right. Right. All right. Well, this has been a really great, really informative, really great. Thank you both. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Whitney. I want to have you both back on. I want you both invested in helping me figure out how to make some of this stuff go for this town hall in Jacksonville. I mean it. And everybody, thanks for watching. Hey, take what we said tonight. Take it home with you. Take it home and think about it. Think about we don't have to, like Whitney said, we don't have to solve it all. We don't have to literally solve world hunger tonight. And I think Don said something similar. We don't have to get it all over with in the next year. And not everyone's going to be a Whitney or a Don. But every one of us could be some part of that. Every one of us could do a little more. And every single one of us could work to actually understand people who are not like us more. That's it. That's an easy one. Stop living in your Facebook box, in your Facebook bubble, and let in another one you don't know. Whether that's about black and white, left and right. That's a first step toward coming together. And it's one we can all take. I'm Rob Nelson. It's Rob Nelson Live. Thanks for being part of it.